A person who weighs 100 pounds on Earth weighs 16.6 pounds on the moon. Which variable is the independent variable? Explain why. The weight on Earth is independent. And the reason is because the weight on the moon depends on how much you weigh on Earth. So since it's depending on something else, the independent variable is the weight on Earth. What is an equation that relates weight on Earth to weight on the moon? Since the weight on Earth is independent, we'll label that X, and the weight on the moon is dependent, we'll label that Y. To find the constant of proportionality, we're going to do Y divided by X. And in this case, the weight on the moon is 16.6, and the weight on Earth is 100. Which is the same as 0.166. So our equation says y equals kx, and I now know that k is 0.166, so I can swap that out in my equation. C. How much would a 185-pound astronaut weigh on the moon? So we're going to plug in his weight in our equation. Use an equation to explain how you know. So what we get out of this, when we multiply 0.166 by 185, will tell us their weight on the moon. And it comes out to be about 30.71 pounds on the moon. How much would a man who weighs 50 pounds on the moon weigh on Earth? Remember, X is the Earth, so that's the one we're looking for. Y is the moon, so we can fill that in with the 50, because that was his weight on the moon. We can work backwards to solve this equation by dividing both sides by 0.166. This side divides out, and we are left with X, and on the other side, we'll get 301 pounds on Earth. Use this table to answer the following questions. A. Which variable is the dependent variable and why? The gas is something that we don't change, but the miles we drive changes based on how much gas we have. So the miles driven depends on how much gas we have. How much gas? So, miles is the dependent variable. If there isn't enough room on your paper, you can use a separate sheet of paper and staple it to it. B. Is the number of miles driven proportionally related to the number of gallons of gas? If so, what is the equation that relates the number of miles driven to the number of miles, or the number of gallons of gas? So here, 62 divided by 2, 124 divided by 4, and 310 divided by 10. We want these all to come out to the same number. This one we can divide out a 10 and we're left with 31. 62 split into 2 equal parts is 31. And 124 split into 4 equal parts is 31. So, for 2B, is it proportional? Yes. All have a constant of 31. And then it says, what is the equation? So we're going to make this one be x and this one be y. and we use y equals kx, but we know k is 31, so we can substitute that in. C. In any ratio relating the number of gallons of gas and the number of miles driven, will one of the values always be larger? If so, which one? If we disregard 0, 0, it appears that every time the miles driven is going to be the bigger one in comparison to the gallons of gas. So yes, except for at the origin, the miles will always be a larger number. D. If the number of gallons of gas is known, can we find the number of miles driven? Explain how this value would be calculated. Yes. We use y equals 31x and plug in the gallons of gas for x. If the number of miles is known, can you find the number of gallons used? Yes. Using the same equation, we would put the miles in the y's position, and then we would solve for x. We would use some dividing on that one to solve for x. F. How many miles could be driven with 18 gallons of gas? So we're going to plug it in. When you multiply, what does that equal? How many of gallons of gas are used when the car is driven 18 miles? So this time we're putting the 18 in the miles position. And we're going to have to divide by 31 on both sides. So x is 18 over 31. Give me that as a decimal, please. H. How many miles have been driven when half of a gallon is used? Another way to write half is with a 0.5. Tell me what that equals when you multiply 31 and a half. How many gallons have been used when the car has driven for half a mile? So we're going to put the half in the miles position this time. We have to divide both sides by 31. So tell me what that equals when we have half divided by 31. Tell me what it is as a decimal. Make sure you fill in all those 4 blanks for F through I and write your name on your paper.